Okay, great. Let's get started. Greetings and thank you for joining me for a quick tour of HingeEPM, our hosted enterprise application for managing energy efficiency programs. We'll dive into the application in just a minute, but first I want to say a few things about the architecture and the scope of programs that we do support. HingeEPM is an enterprise software platform built from the ground up to support energy efficiency programs. We've used industry standard components such as .NET, Adobe Flex, SharePoint Services, Microsoft Workflow Foundation, and Microsoft SQL Server Report Services to build a very rich set of capabilities, rarely available in homegrown applications. And while we've used these standard components, we're by no means a generic workflow engine. We're very much designed to the exact needs of energy efficiency programs. In fact, we've been under development over the past 2 years, and there are a lot of things you'll see today that reflect the fact that we're really engineered to support EE programs and nothing else. For example, we have pre-built workflow objects that support the different types of energy efficiency programs. So whether it's a simple rebate with one cycle of approval and just 2 stakeholders, or a home audit that's got another stakeholder in the form of a contractor that's going to go to somebody's house or business and record lots of information, or all the way down to a complex C&I project with 4 or 5 cycles of approval and 4 or 5 stakeholders, we've got workflow objects pre-built to support those types of programs. So without further ado, let me jump into the application and get this demo started. Here we are at the login screen. I'm going to log in as Steve Edwards. He's a program director. So he sees the roll-up of data from 9 different programs and 2 different program managers and gets a bird's eye view of performance year to date. His landing page is what we call the portfolio dashboard, and the way we've set it up right now is that it's got 2 charts. One is performance relative to incentive spending goals, and then the second is performance relative to energy savings goals. The orange mark is your year-to-date target, the green mark is the year-end goal, and then the stacked bar chart is a pipeline analysis of projects in the queue ranging from the planning stage all the way through the booked stage. So what we can see here is that while we're very far behind on our year-to-date and annual target for incentive spending, the good news is that the energy performance of the projects we've got in the queue is quite high. But we need to be careful and make sure that these projects that are not yet booked, everything but the dark green, actually get completed. Now, one of the things we can do is look around at different charts to help fill in the picture. This one is an example of one we developed to show the number of projects and the number of contractors involved. So 145 projects across 13 different contractors. That's not a lot of participation. So perhaps part of what's going on here is that we've failed on our marketing efforts. So we haven't really moved on getting contractors and getting incentives out there. The good news is that the programs themselves were very well engineered, so we get a lot of energy savings for each project that we are completing and for each dollar that we're spending. Now, like I said, this is a portfolio view, so I can begin to drill down into the data and see where the exceptional performance or weak performance is. I can go to my program group level, which is configured here to distinguish between commercial programs and residential programs. And while we can see that the things are pretty much the same on commercial and residential as far as spending is concerned, as far as energy savings is concerned, it's the commercial programs that are really overperforming. And if I wanted to drill down even farther into the program level and just look at commercial programs, I can see that within commercial programs, there's just one that's really outperforming all the rest, and that's my prescriptive measures program. And so that's where all the success is. And if I want to drill down and see what's driving that success, I can. I just click on the stacked bar chart section, and it'll bring me into a list view. This is actually a view that would be typically used by a program manager to get more details. And so a couple things that we can see right away, even though this is a pretty generic-looking screen, is the aging analysis. All these red dots mean that these projects are languishing in the current stage of their workflow. So what this means is that while the projects are done, something's going wrong in the inspection cycle. Maybe we lack having enough inspectors, or maybe they're finding a lot of problems. So before we can count all those energy savings, we better drill in and figure out what's going on with the inspection stage of the project cycle. If I drill into one project, you'll begin to see the rich data that we can capture on a per project basis. This is an example of a a complex project where there are multiple sites, so 2 different sites, and each site multiple measures being installed. And in HingeEPM, we track a variety of attributes at the measure level. So just the measure itself, we are capturing the following bits of information: climate zone, the insulation that's being replaced, the heating type, square footage, cost, all of the bits of information that are necessary in order to calculate both the energy savings and the incentive that we're offering for this measure. We capture all that information not just at the pre-approval stage, but at each stage of the life cycle of the project. And since this particular project has 2 cycles, a pre-approval stage where program management approves what will be installed, and then a post-installation approval where we go back and look at what was installed and see if it's the same thing, we'll be capturing the demand savings and the energy savings once the inspector's gone out and done that work. So this is an example of where the data entry gets done right here in the online user interface. Another example is as follows, where we attach an Excel worksheet and we pull the data from mapped fields. If we were to, this is what this Excel spreadsheet looks like. We can do fairly sophisticated things in Excel workbooks. It's a very familiar user interface for professional energy contractors. So for example, here we've got a lighting equipment data intake form where we use structured fields, pick lists, and factors that can't be edited by anybody but us in the red tables. That way we can capture quite a bit of data even though the online application wouldn't easily support it, especially if we're trying to do the data entry in an offline environment. So back to the demo here. Oops, just getting a little error message from GoToMeeting. Let me back up a second, get back into our demo. Some of the other types of information we can look at on a per project basis: project history, contract adjustment, inspection lists. We publish reports for the inspector to look at each attribute of each measure, documents attached to the project, etc. Now let's go over to our configuration area and look at how programs are configured in HingeEPM. We're fond of telling people that what typically takes months to customize into a standalone application for one program is really just a matter of hours of data input in HingeEPM. So here's my list of programs that are in the demo system: 3 commercial programs and 6 residential programs. They're all configured in the same exact set of views. So these 7 screens that are listed across here are the same things that you have to go through regardless of the type of program that you've got. And I've looked at dozens of programs, and I haven't found one yet that can't basically be supported through this configuration methodology. I'll go through each one really quickly just to give you a sense for the type of information we capture. Program option is where we decide the date ranges for contractor enrollment, for project submission, project completion, those kinds of things. We have a modeling window where you can go in and futz around with the different rebate amounts or incentive amounts per measure to see if you're going to get the energy savings and the total costs aligned the way you want. And we determine here what the data intake methodology is going to be for this program. We range everywhere from a very simple online form metaphor to, in this example, Excel-based for measure details. That would be the example I just showed you of the lighting retrofit. Constraints are where we put constraints on enrollment criteria, so things like rate class. If we want a particular rebate to only be available to single-family homeowners, we can do that through the rate classes. Restrictions on proposals in terms of minimum incentive amounts for an amount of demand savings or energy savings, etc. Measures are the measures associated with this program. Workflow is a big part of HingeEPM, like I said. This is an example of a very complicated program. So we've got 4 cycles of approval in each project, and then we have a cycle of approval just for approving contractors that can participate in the program. Rules are where we set up triggered events based on attributes of the data, and this can be a trigger based on an enrollment or on a project submission. Here's an example. I'll just drill into one. If we wanted to do a minimum check on demand savings for a project submission, this is where we'd set it up. In a lot of cases, we can just use the ones we've already set up. It's all drag and drop, so if I want to update a rule, I can just drag and drop the equation in either the object or the operator. And then the kinds of things that we can execute on a triggered event are popping an alert, sending an email notification, throwing an error message, locking the application, or locking the project. Submittals are documents that we need to see attached to the project. So an example would be a cut sheet or a project spec, and then generic documents or training or marketing literature that are associated with a given program. One last thing that I want to show you before we jump out of here is how online forms are configured. So while we have a great user interface for trainable users to capture a lot of rich data on complex projects, we've spent a fair amount of time trying to develop a user interface for walk up and use users like a homeowner. So for example, in Home Audit, the program manager, this is all on the setup stage, would go into the configuration area and set up the online form. Each form has a different set of sections, and what we're seeing here is which sections have been chosen for an online request for a home audit. So depending on the type of program, you might need different sections. And so by researching programs across the country, we've arrived at the total universe of sections that would be appropriate for an online form, and they're picked for on a program-by-program basis. So let's actually log in or take a look at how the online experience works for typical users. What I'm going to do first is switch over to, just to give us some bearings, this is what the current state of the industry looks like. This is ThermWise. This is the energy efficiency website of gas utility in Utah and Wyoming. And they're typical of many of them, where the residential ratepayers brought to a website where they could pick between a home audit or an appliance rebate or a weatherization rebate, get the details, and then drill in and then ultimately get a PDF form for the kind of rebate that they want. So in this case, let's say I want a window rebate. All they do is give me a PDF form that I then have to print out, fill in manually, and either fax or mail to them. And that's a fairly lengthy process that's prone to a lot of data entry error and frustration. So what we've done is put this whole process online. So here's the same form in an online environment where we've pre-populated where we could. We asked the questions that are relevant to that measure request, and we allow the visitor to attach any submittals digitally, or they can explain that they're going to fax them or mail them as they need to. And then there's the digital signature and some marketing information here. Okay, so one last thing I want to show you, and then we'll wrap things up. What I'm going to do is log in as the ratepayer again and look at an audit. An audit would be a fairly specialized version of an online form. Let me just back up a second. Okay, so the way this works, I'm actually looking at it from the program manager's view, but we'll just start here, is that the customer completes their information, then they make a scheduling request. The program manager looks at the scheduled request against their capacity table, and they can see on the requested dates that they have slots. He's approved the 28th of September at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because it looks like they're pretty thin on morning appointments. And then he picks the contractor. And once the contractor is picked and assigned, it goes automatically to that contractor. So what I'm going to do here is log in as a typical contractor and just show you what the scheduling and routing looks like. Okay, so here's the list of projects, and if he wants to see his schedule for the day, he'd go in here, and that'll pull up my projects for the day, and hopefully a Google map with the route all figured out for him. So we'll see if that comes up as intended.